Magic.
Alright. Hey everyone, welcome back to the podcast. This is The Pieces Are Here. I'm Scott.
I'm Josh.
And today we have a special guest with us. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. I'm Hungry Hippo. I'm TG.
And can you elaborate what you kind of do on your podcast?
Yeah, I do a little bit of the same stuff that Scott and Josh do over here. I talk about magic. I post little shorts. Do little fun stuff with magic.
Do you get any inspiration from us?
Yeah, from your last episode, I decided to steal your guys' saying, the cards put in the work, because I noticed you guys said it a lot. So for my shorts, I title it MTG Commander Cards That Put in the Work.
I'm honored, honestly.
You better be.
Alright, so today we're going to be talking about the new set from Magic the Gathering.
Phyrexia, all will be one.
Yes. So where do you guys want to begin?
Well, I don't know much about the set.
I'm in the same boat.
We have an expert here, though, who just drafted it for pre-release.
I won't call myself an expert. I went 2-2 in the pre-release. So.
Like 2 minutes before, he's like, you guys got to do your research. I'm like, we'll see what you have to say about it, I guess. I don't know too much about it.
You went 2-2. I went 0-0 at the pre-release, so...
I don't know. I mean, it's pretty interesting, some of the mechanics they decided to add into it. There's some stuff that I like, some stuff that I don't. Let's dive into some of it. So let's do the 3 main mechanics that they have in this set. Let's talk about Toxic. So for those of you that do not know what Toxic is, basically Toxic will add poison counters whenever combat damage is dealt. So let's say a creature had Toxic 1. If that creature deals combat damage, then it deals 1 poison counter. Let's say it had Toxic 2, it would do 2 poison counters. So it depends on how much Toxic that'll add however many poison counters.
And a caveat to that, Hunger Hippo was mentioning how like a 4/4 creature can come in with only Toxic 3, but it's only going to deal 3 poison counters.
Yeah, it's not based upon the creature's power, it's based upon how much Toxic they have. So what do you guys think about that mechanic?
I don't think it's here to stay. I can't see myself utilizing this in Commander. I guess some poison counter decks are going to like it, but I don't think it adds a lot.
I think there's some alright cards in this set. I mean, obviously, if you can get a card, if you have the exact same card and one says poison, one says toxic, you're probably going to take the poison card because, as he said, you can buff it up and it'll deal more poison.
Yeah, I mean, personally, I don't mind it overall because there's some interesting cards in the set that they just released. One of them I used in the pre-release, it basically gave a creature Toxic 2. So let's say, for instance, you had a creature that was dealing maybe trample damage and you wanted to potentially try to win off of poison, you could potentially get it through with adding Toxic through an enchantment. I don't mind it like that, but in all honesty, I don't like it as much as I like Infect. I think Infect is way better in my opinion because you could beef that creature up to a 10/10 and then it kills one player. It's a one-shot.
Right. I haven't seen this in play, but I view it as a nerfed version of Infect.
Correct. That's what they were mainly shooting for, I think, as well.
You also miss out on, with Infect, the creatures deal combat damage at -1/-1 counters, which is a little thing, but I mean, it can be huge if you're going up against like indestructible creatures or stuff like that.
Yeah, it adds up in ways that you don't realize. Like, we got this nerfed version of Infect, but those -1/-1 counters do, as we like to say, put some work in.
For sure. Alright, let's move along into another mechanic that they have in this new set. Let's talk about oil counters. So oil counters basically are the specialty counters that are in this set. Whenever a creature gets oil counters onto it, it'll have an ability that maybe allows you to remove so many, and that allows a creature to perform a certain ability. So what do you guys think about oil counters?
Once again, it's more of a niche mechanic that's not going to stick around for a while. Just like with the Ever counters we were talking about, I don't see it staying for too long. It's like energy counters. It had specific sets it was in, but I don't think it's not here to stay.
Yeah, every set kind of has their own like gimmicky type thing that they try to push for. I mean, Ikoria, you had counters that stuck, and then all these other sets, I can't really think of too many examples.
I'm thinking of Bushido.
Bushido.
Stuff like that.
Yeah.
Like, maybe in Standard it was good, but...
Yes, Surveil was huge, and like the Ravnica blocks. It's just something that's like specific to the plane or the theme they're trying to build. I guess it's very thematic. It fits the all will be one Phyrexian oil thing.
Correct, yeah. And I think with that, too, it depends what format you're playing in. If you're playing in a limited format, oil counters are very good. If you're playing in like a more broad format, like Modern or Commander, that uses a larger card pool, oil counters aren't probably that good.
Right. From our perspective, we always take it from Commander. oil counters are not good.
Correct, but like whenever I went to the pre-release event, somebody did play with an oil counters deck. They beat me. They flushed me out. So I mean, it can be a good mechanic in certain instances, but for Commander, I wouldn't recommend running it honestly, unless you have ways to add more oil counters. So let's talk about that. Sort of segues into our next mechanic, Proliferate. What do you guys think of Proliferate? They kind of brought it back from other sets. What do you guys think?
I'm glad to see it. Any support Proliferate can get, I'm all for it. Decks that like to utilize it, like Group Hug and your Atraxa deck that wants to proliferate, sure. I mean, it can always use some help.
Yeah, it's an interesting mechanic. I like running counters decks every so often, and Proliferate's a huge thing in counters decks, so I'm glad to see it. There's a couple cards in there, though, that I'm kind of wondering, why did they make that? Like that artifact where it gives Planeswalkers the ability to proliferate? That's kind of questionable on why they
I can see that
one.
getting pretty cracked real fast. People are gonna cheat that.
I don't mind it for Super Friends, honestly.
Little bias.
I'm just saying, I don't mind it for Super Friends because, like, you figure you kind of have to work up to that point in order to get to the -12 ability of taking an extra turn. So you have to have enough Planeswalkers out in order to do that, or other ways to proliferate. It can get cracked, but I think you have to work your way up. People can just, and also too, it's an artifact. Artifacts are pretty easy to remove in Commander, I'd say, so you can easily get rid of that too, and that gets rid of it.
I think it's one of those cards where it can be cracked if you want it to be cracked,
Correct.
but you can play at lower power if you want to. It's versatile in that sense, which I give respect for that.
Correct.
But that's the main proliferate card we're all thinking of when this is a new set.
Yeah, it's a bit too early to tell. It's kind of like Bootlegger Stash, where everybody thought it was going to be absolutely crazy and running all over the place, but it didn't end up being like too bad. It'll probably be like that. We'll see in a couple months whether it really is that good.
Same thing with Beseju.
Yeah.
It was like, oh, this card, like, why would they ever think about making this? And then you play it and it's like, okay, well, this is manageable.
Correct, yeah. One thing I do want to talk about Proliferate as well, because somebody at the pre-release told me this, and I didn't even realize this. You don't get to choose what counters you add on top of that permanent. So let's say, for instance, a permanent had a -1/-1 counter, and then a +1/+1, or let's say, or not a +1/+1 counter. Let's say they had an oil counter on it as well. You have to add both of those onto it, which is kind of interesting to think about. You can't get to choose what counter gets added. It was just interesting to me to hear that, because I always thought you got to pick, you know?
Yeah, we always played like you
Correct. Yeah, you do not get to pick. It
It's
just
all
says
or
you
nothing.
choose the permanent and you add whatever counters that creature has, or whatever counters that permanent has. You add another one of those counters on top of it.
Yeah.
So it's very interesting to think about that too, because you can kind of abuse that as well.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know if I've ever had like a scenario on board where a
Multiple
creature
counters.
had 2 counters on it.
I don't know. Most people don't encounter that, but it's just interesting to think about, honestly.
Yeah, that's a cool thing about Magic. We're always learning.
Yeah, for sure, for sure.
Well, thank you everyone for tuning in. This was The Pieces Are There. I'm Scott.
I'm Josh.
And I'm Hungry Hippo MTG.
All right, we'll see you everyone.
See ya.
See ya. Have a good day.